Welcome to the FMCG Guys, the podcast that dives into the innovation, strategy, and trends shaping consumer goods and retail in Europe and beyond.
Welcome to a new episode of the FMCG Guys, live from London at Bain & Company's office. I'm sitting down with Bahige El-Rayes, who's a partner here and leader in performance improvement. Hi, Bahige. Nice to finally meet you.
Yes, good to meet you in sunny London on a Friday afternoon for a change.
Yeah, we're excited to spend the weekend here. Bit of English countryside.
Exactly.
So,
I wish I can tell you that this is what the expectation to have every time, but no, we've had
it's not Barcelona.
No, it's not Barcelona.
Yeah. How long have you been in London?
I've been here 5 years.
5 years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I feel like I've quite set my expectation on, you have to be ready for everything.
Yeah, well, 5 years teach you a lot, right? And what 5 years you've been here as well?
Exactly. We've seen a lot. We've seen multiple changes. But it's a very dynamic hub with lots of talent, lots of creativity. As you can see, our offices here is just next to Covent Garden on the Strand. We have lots of talent that reside here, so it's really good to be part of this team.
It is true that London is one of these cities that attracts, like, people that move to London a lot of times go for work, and it attracts like a certain caliber of people, if you like.
Exactly.
That for example, in Barcelona, of course you find smart people that move there, but a lot of people move there for the sun, which is fine, but you know what I mean. So Bahige, you were telling me that you just came from the Procurement Leaders Conference. I know that you were on a panel there with some pretty high-stakes people. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, look, we've been going to the Procurement Leaders Conference for a while. And this year, there was a lot of discussions on the changing mandate of CPO, so Chief Procurement Officer. And it's quite interesting where historically, if you were to think about CPOs, they've been in charge of driving cost and cash at the right quality, and supporting the business. And now, basically, they're the custodians of sustainability because, if you look in CP companies, a big portion of their P&L is cost of goods sold, and that is the custodian of that is CPOs. So a lot of the decarbonization and climate change will come from CPOs. Resiliency is a big topic. Traceability is another topic. So the list keeps on going.
Yeah.
But then how do you actually make it happen? So our panel was a provocative title a little bit, which is the magic and the how. How will teams adapt to meet the challenges of tomorrow? So that was the one. And we had like really interesting panelists from Heineken, from Mars, and from Helion.
And all CPOs, right?
And all CPOs. And we were able to basically compare and contrast a little bit their approaches, which is, I find it fascinating, learned a lot, and were able to actually also bring in some really cool perspectives.
Do you remember any like specific quote that was said that you think is
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there was a couple of things. One is how do you evolve the center of gravity? Historically, all CPOs have been really thinking about a category-centric approach, right? Like, I'm in charge of chemicals or packaging, etc. And we think the world of tomorrow is going to be a bit different. There could be a more modular approach. There could be essentially a knowledge with categories, but business partnering is so important.
Yeah.
So how do you actually go localize your assortment and when in Brazil or in Asia, and what's the role of the supply chain and procurement teams to actually do that? That requires much closer business partnership, and therefore your setup would be different.
Much more granularity, if you
exactly.
like,
And we had a really good discussion about where do you place your rock stars, right? And where do you find them? And those are really important questions. Are the rock stars basically the ones that allow you to business partner, or the ones that are not? And there was a really cool perspective that, this is not about one size fit all. It's like a chessboard with different skill sets. And, you would basically need to adapt.
Interesting. And I wonder, like, if that's going to mean that the people that get into procurement earlier in their careers have like a different background than today. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And then historically, it has been the engineers, process-oriented, Six Sigma.
Yeah.
They're, and like if you look at the skill sets of the future, you need the creative business partnering role, able to inspire the teams, and being the architect of the change. That's a huge change in mindset.
There is a school of thought that says that humanities majors will be in high demand in the next few years because of that ability to think outside the box, basically.
Exactly. Look, in Bain, we've been, you look at the people we hire, there's not a specific trajectory or undergraduate degree that you need to have to come in. We hire a lot of people on the arts and the social background. As much as we do an engineering background, we believe in the big diversity is diversity of thought.
Yeah.
And that is
the
actually
unspoken diversity.
Absolutely. And that brings you the best outcome. And I think it's the same thing in procurement or supply chain where this is the next big change.
Yeah, no, but it's interesting because like when I hire at a senior level, like I don't really look at what people studied, honestly.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Maybe I shouldn't say that, no, but I think it's more like the experience and the character. It's interesting. Maybe at the undergraduate, like at the graduate entry level, they should also look at things that are not only their studies.
Absolutely,
no?
Absolutely.
So, I've here in London been meeting with people, and everybody asked me, "Hey, Daniel, how do you see the industry?" So I'm going to bring this question to you. How do you see the industry specifically? Let's talk about it, maybe FMCG.
Yes.
So fast-moving consumer goods,
yes.
CPG in the US.
Yeah.
How are you seeing it? Because we're coming from well, maybe you can give us a bit of the perspective as well of where we're coming from. COVID years.
Yeah.
The winners in those years.
Yes.
And the not so much winners in those years.
Look, if I take a step back, okay, CPGs I remember, as a kid, like I was always looking at the CPGs, amazed. It was the hub of all innovations, of where all the magic, all the big brands came up. It made us dream, right? And we still have like those fantastic set of brands that we have, right? And then historically, that they've been driving a lot of that innovation and growth, etc. What was happening pre-COVID is that, as basically many CP companies became bigger and bigger, the ability to team up and, co-create and co-innovate, etc., is becoming, more and more challenging. Therefore, we saw smaller brands we called insurgent brands. From 2015 till 2020, basically gain a lot of ground, right? And they're basically driving the innovation. And what we saw is that major CP companies, to adapt, they've basically trying to either acquire them or do what I call reverse integration, which is learn from what they're doing and to change the way they operate. Now, come forward, COVID happened, and in COVID, as you know, security of supply became top of mind, supply chains became top of mind. And what we saw is that from a demand standpoint, obviously there were certain categories that were more in demand and basically companies that flourished. Pet care is an example. A lot of people bought pets during that time.
I know.
And all the e-commerce businesses you can imagine. So there was quite a bit of that.
Yeah, ironically, I remember consumer healthcare went down at the beginning, you remember? Because people ironically were getting less ill. And less in need for like cold and flu and all these things, medicines.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. And what we saw is that to be able to adapt that environment, large CPG companies that actually had an edge, right? Because they basically had the ability to distribute and get there. So we've seen quite a bit of boost over the last few years of CPG companies that basically were able, even with all the challenges, to benefit, and much more than smaller companies.
Yeah.
So we saw a bit of a reversal of that trend. But 2023...
Because they were able to ramp up the capabilities, production lines quicker than...
Exactly.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
And what we saw, however, is that in 2023, so last year, is the big change. Okay.
In 2023?
Yes, so coming into this year. What happened in 2023? First of all, we saw that a lot of the growth that came essentially from pricing. So they were basically driving a lot of the growth by pricing up to the customer. We saw volume, continue to be challenged. A lot of basically attention with the customers, with retailers. We saw that while there is a lot of commitments on ESG, very few actually have moved the needle and to accelerate. Yes. And we see that basically volumes continue to be a challenge. So now I think the key question for major CPG companies is how do we reinvigorate the growth? How do you drive volume growth? And what's the role of supply chain to actually get to that? And what's the role of how do you actually drive the next value of shareholder return and stakeholder return more broadly? That's how we see it.
Yeah, and let's go actually right into it. Maybe you can tell us a bit about the work that you do around supply chain at Bain, because I know that you've been in consumer goods for a long time, but a lot of the work you do is actually in supply chain.
Indeed, and look, in my mind, when you talk about supply chain, you shouldn't be talking about it in absolute. You really need to talk about it in a segmented way, right? It's not one size fits all. In any business that you have, you really need to start with what are you solving for? And in supply chain, you have what we call the lean and efficient supply chain, which is, this is for the stuff that I can predict, that is like, a big batch size, predictable, that I want to run as lean and as efficient as possible, right? And in this case, I would imagine a good supply chain would be able to almost predict what their customers would need before they need it, start producing before, have as less as possible changeovers on the line, and really run it in the most efficient way possible. Then you have another, which is basically managing complexity. So you have a fragmentation. We talk about fragmentation in the customer space. And in that standpoint, we see that supply chain is all about managing for complexity. The way you set up is very differently. You basically create flexibility. You create ability to change your changes in demand, and how do you pivot, and the incentives and how you set up your supply chain is different. As an example, you may have what you call late-stage differentiation. So you may have a center that basically say, if I want to run a promotion, and adapt to a new movie that happened and have a whole set of promotion around that movie. I want to able to do that in 4 to 6 weeks and have my items on the shelf with the right displays or the right packaging. I'm able to do that. And you'll be surprised. That's the role of supply chain, and to being able to do that drives a lot of growth. So the incentives in this space would be very different.
Yeah, because one normally thinks of like ways out of like going back to growth for FMCGs being like a purely like commercial marketing thing. And there's a lot more to it, right? Like what you're saying, like enabling that innovation to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. But how are you seeing like most FMCG companies operating? Like what's the status of supply chain today? If we took a picture, what would we see?
I would say that everyone realizes the change. Everyone realizes the need to basically adopt technology. Everyone realizes the need to improve and drive sustainability. It's still a very strong manufacturing culture, I would say. There's a lot of thinking about manufacturing or thinking about planning or different elements. What I tend to find few companies do well is to think of supply chain as end-to-end, to not think about it as a manufacturing, logistics, planning, or procurement, or customer service, but how do you actually think about it end-to-end? So for example, one of the leading personal care companies, they incentivize their supply chain on shelf availability. So if I go look in a supermarket, as an example, and look at shelves and see which items are in stock and out of stock, my supply chain is incentivized on that. While you can think about, for me to be in stock on the shelf, there's so many things that needs to be true. And many of those are not in the control of supply chain. But the ability to think end-to-end from a customer service all the way to the procurement and planning and manufacturing and logistics, that is what makes a good supply chain stand out. And that ability to think end-to-end is going to be really needed. going forward, and very few are doing that.
Oh, really? Well, and what ways can supply chain, you think, enable companies to grow, again, FMCGs? Because, you know, again, one could think of like, yeah, they need to launch new products, they need to speak better to their consumers, but when you think of like the levers that supply chain can pull, which ones do you see?
Yeah,
like most?
and if I may, I'm going to flip your question. Let's basically think, what are the levers for a company can use to actually grow?
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what we see is a fragmentation and the consumer and customer base, right? And you've seen that. I don't know if you agree with me, but I also see a little bit of a bifurcation of the market where you have the premiumization on the one hand, and you also have value on the other hand.
And it's like across the board as well.
Exactly.
It's like FMCGs with fashion, it's very obvious. Like that middle category has suffered a lot. Exactly,
and we see it in food, and we see it in multiple areas. Then I also see an increased personalization. So the need to actually personalize, whether it's going direct to consumer and driving that. I also see that consumers are asking not the or, but the and. So the value proposition from their portfolio keeps on increasing. So they want a product that is convenient, superior, that has a good ESG, decarbonization, etc. They want all of those and at a good price point. Well, I argue every single one of those is as much a supply chain question as a demand question. So let's take an example. One of those. Let's pick one. Let's say the bifurcation of the market between value and premiumization. Well, for you to play a value play, it means that you have to hit a certain price point. Well, this becomes a really good provocation. If I want to hit a certain price point at a certain margin, how do I reinvigorate and value stream my plan, make, source, deliver, and how I formulate products to actually hit that price point? That's the role of supply chain. Let me give you another example. If I'm basically thinking about the proposition for the consumer, I need a product that is superior, that is basically good for the environment, that is basically margin efficient and all of that. Well, that's designed to X, right? That's basically you redesign your portfolio. You really think about how do I run efficient supply chains and basically procurement of different specifications, etc., to actually meet a certain goal, whether it's carbon or whether it is superiority or whether it's growth. So that's why I'm saying, often when you think of the role of supply chain, you should start with what is my objective as a business? And how can I enable that?
And do you think that a lot of companies, it's still like an afterthought, the supply chain?
Well, it depends. There are some that are more mature than others. Definitely, it's moving towards that space. If you look at the center of gravity of major CPG companies, they realize it should be as close to the consumers as possible. So they're basically trying to really create local accountability and as much as possible. Many of them are. And therefore, we see that supply chain moving in that direction, but many of them still have work to do.
I imagine. By the way, I was at the Stackline's event yesterday that I told you about, and they said that only 12% of consumers repeat a purchase of a brand, that the others or go to another brand or leave the category. 12%.
It's crazy. Yeah. Can you imagine how hard that is?
I know.
Yeah.
But I mean, in some ways it's good in the way of for companies to think, okay, it's great new customer acquisition is great, but we should really loyalize, because it's really the Pareto principle, right? So loyalize that customer,
right,
and that consumer, and I think that there's a lot of it that comes from what you said here as well.
Exactly, and for how do you actually make sure that you have repeat business and then keep the same loyal customers, and how do you serve them the best? What makes them actually stick? That's the question.
Yeah. And are there any industries where you think that reality of supply chain acting as an accelerator for the business has happened more?
Yes, for sure. I think that if you look a little bit of anything that requires a high degree of personalization and basically more direct to consumer, as an example, such as in personal care, where you basically have a lot of we have a lot of the startup that basically been there. That's where I see, the more personalization that you need, the more likely you have like supply chain being in a cross-functional teaming driving that.
Yeah, and you talked about startups, and I know that's something that you look at. These startups, how do they organize their supply chain to have to give that more personalized experience?
Yeah, look, the big difference is that instead of having how the decisions making are driven and how basically teams are done. So in a startup environment, you often have a product leader that basically brings a team around him or her, which is everything from technology to supply chain to legal and R&D, etc. And you basically work in a very cross-functional team to solve a very quick goal to get to that. Sounds easier said than done. In a small team of 100 people, it's easier to do that. But in a huge organization where you have so many different teams, so many markets, you have a matrix structure. Doing that's the challenge.
Yeah, and then you have a factor that's super important, which is egos, like the huge battle of egos of, oh yeah, I don't want to work for that person because that person is more junior, or I don't like them. I think that's a huge thing in corporations that they kind of have to address at some point.
Exactly.
Because it's just creating like a paralysis, I think.
Exactly. And that's the role of a good leader at the end of the day, which is how do you put a culture where you put that aside and then basically you incentivize people to have like a test and learn, and then it's okay to fail. And if you fail, learn and show me how you've done that.
Yeah.
There's all of those things, and I think there is, the risk of being cheesy. There's this whole thing called red is good, meaning like if you show me areas where you are not meeting your objective, I encourage that.
Yeah.
But I think what you're trying to say is, I want you to show initiative that you're actually trying to tackle that. I'm going to reward the effort first and foremost, and then the outcome would come.
Yeah, like to actually put as a KPI that people take initiative and so on, no, and disrupt.
Yeah.
Is that well? And actually, now that you speak about leadership, like if supply chain has this changing role, what type of leaders do they need? Because maybe the leaders people that have grown up in this supply chain which was more like an enabler, maybe are not fit for supply chain as an accelerator.
Exactly. Look, first of all, we cannot paint every company the same way. There are some companies that are operating in industries where you really need to basically still hold a supply chain that is clean, efficient, on time, etc. There's not a lot of innovation, etc. But in majority of CPG across sectors where basically we're going after growth and volumes, etc., I think the leaders of tomorrow's are the ones that are recognizing their role as enterprise-wide, that do not wait to be told what are the objectives. And a lot of people are usually waiting to be told where the business is going.
Yeah.
I think the leaders of tomorrow, in my mind, are the ones that are co-creating, really recognizing that they have an equal role to shape the future of the company, right? So, a lot of the objectives of, okay, do I go through this growth vector or that growth vector, depends on the ability to actually do it, at the right, balanced outcomes, right? Can I do it and drive the profitable growth, right? Profit is part of the growth. And I think that's a mindset shift. That leadership requires the person to see themselves as an orchestrator or an architect, and not necessarily have the answers to everything.
Yeah, and that they're co-creating the company, no?
Exactly.
And it's not only like a CEO that sets the vision and everybody kind of obeys, no?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's quite a big mindset shift, no? And when you look at supply chains, what are the key, when you go to work with one of your clients, what are the key metrics, KPIs that you're looking at? And I know that it's a very generalistic question, but
again, the foremost is basically understanding are you working towards the goals of the company, right? So what is the goal of the company and trying to do that? So the first thing I would do is basically look into a 5-year plan of a company, try to see basically where are the major growth vectors, what are contributing to that growth. And really thinking about, okay, if basically what are the major avenues of growth that I see, and what's the role of supply chain in each one of them. And maybe one of the profitable growth is all about cost and productivity, because you need a certain cost envelope to be able to fuel investment in brands, to be able to fuel investment in sustainability, to be able to fuel expansion geographically or whatever. Then if it's cost is one of them, I want to see basically what is my pipeline, how much that I deliver on it, on a regular basis. Often I see on that cost mindset, people hold back because they're afraid to have a target. So I want to also see not only what is the target, I want to see is there ideas, is there enough ideas in the machine, or is there just basically targets that we go after? So is there a pipeline issue or is it a delivery problem? So I always like to look into that. And then if the goal is basically supporting the growth in certain vectors, like what you talk about, design to X, or basically reformulating the portfolio, I want to see what they've done that. And at the end of the day, the killer metric for me is the Net Promoter Score.
What's that?
At Bain, we are very proud that we have been, the inventors of the Net Promoter Score, which basically measures how much of your customers actually, recommend you to someone else. So for me, a supply chain, at the end of the day, you want to look at all the stakeholders that they've been serving and see, okay, from a scale 0 to 10, would you recommend that service to someone else? And 9 and 10 being promoters. So for me, like keeping that in mind becomes a really important metric to think about.
And is that like an internal of the company metric, or is it like with the customer, like I don't know, with the big key accounts?
I would have both. I'm reading a book by Will Guidara called Unreasonable Hospitality. I don't know if I haven't heard about it. I'll pass it on to you. I'll share it with you.
Got it.
But Will is basically responsible of 11 Madison Park, which is a 3-star Michelin restaurant in New York.
Wow.
And the way he talks about how he differentiated is by really thinking about customer service and how do you actually exceed expectation and what's the unreasonable hospitality. And for me, it was just like an inspiration to think is that how often do we think about that concept of exceeding expectation and creating promoters. And the more you start thinking that way of I want to create promoters, the more basically outcome will follow.
No, that's a good point. I'll actually apply it to my own business. Because it's true. Sometimes there's things that are like, even like small details. I'll probably read this book actually, because it sounds really interesting. Small details that actually make a difference and make the experience more memorable. Also good for brands to take note of that in order to like loyalize customers.
Fully agree. And at Bain, we apply it to ourselves. Like at any given time, I can tell you what is my promoter scores with my team, and my team can tell you what's their promoter scores with their teams. And usually also measure clients, and so basically being able to have a bit more transparency, at any point in time, and getting culture of feedback becomes really important. How would you improve if you don't have that?
And when you talk to clients about implementing the Net Promoter Score into their supply chain, how do they take it normally?
You would be surprised how many of them are open.
Okay.
They're very open because if that allows them to be better in their service and in what they do, that's always positive.
Yeah, and it's probably a good way to like start that debate in a like more non-biased way that's maybe less offensive to people and so on. You mentioned that one of the keys of like the procurement area specifically is driving that sustainability agenda, and you said that companies, a lot of them are not actually moving the needle. So what's the picture there with sustainability? Because sometimes to me it seems like companies are only doing the bare minimum for legal requirements, and then...
Look, this morning I was in a discussion in logistics, and you were saying that tomorrow we can take out 80+% of carbon from logistics. Okay, we will move to alternative fuel, but it's gonna cost us a massive cost bill.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of solution. Okay, that we can move as fast as you want to actually take out carbon.
Yeah.
But the question is, who's gonna pay for it?
Yeah.
Okay, and last time I checked, we have multiple CPGs, they have shareholders. And if you miss your quarterly earnings, there's a massive impact to what happened to your stock price. But what we have in sustainability is we don't yet have an accountability mechanism to say if we miss our commitment. And when you have today cost pressures and margin pressures, what we're seeing in some cases is that some of those tough trade-off discussions on carbon or other sustainability metrics are not being fully internalized. Those are really important questions and often remain unaddressed. Or basically, we're putting commitment and we wait until to see what happens.
What is that if a public company goes tomorrow, presents their quarterly results, and is like, we don't have any profit at all. We're losing money because we made this huge commitment to decarbonization. People will they'll make fun of them directly, no? So
the question is, what's the right evolution and how we think about companies? Because I think that it goes two ways. One is we need to move from shareholder impact to stakeholder impact. So the way we basically companies should continue report and telling the story is basically multi-dimensional. But that's a long way really for it to actually fully happen and fully materialize. And that's for me a bit the challenge that we see. But it's an imperative. It's not an or, it's an and. And I think there are ways right now that are win-win that you can go after to actually meet your pledge for 2025 or 2030. That allows you to get there. But going beyond that, I think there is a whole system that requires to be to evolve and change.
Well, I think the whole Milton Friedman idea of basically just focusing on the shareholders, I don't think it gives the right returns. Probably to shareholders it does, but to society, and ultimately that hurts everyone. No?
And look, we're operating in an industry at the end of the day which is consumers at the core. And our consumers today are much more purpose-driven than ever before. So leave aside anything. For you to meet the requirements of future generation, you're going to have to evolve, whether regulators told you to do so or not. But I think it's quite interesting to see, okay, beyond that goal, how do you actually drive that forward, and how does that actually work? Where do you push and where do you not?
No, it's a fascinating topic, and I think we'll see it evolving. It will have to evolve. No, what about circular supply chains? So that was a topic, and I think it's kind of linked to sustainability as well.
Yes,
that was talked before.
Absolutely. Look, I think what we find is that carbon is the easy part. Okay, there's many ways you can get to. Getting circular is one that will shake up the industry quite a lot. Let me tell you why. If you take packaging as an example, and you want to have circular packaging, the way you basically have to go collect all of your packages, the way you have to go reprocess it and really create that supply chain, that's a new supply chain you're creating that does not exist today. And therefore, to actually do that, companies need to think differently. They cannot think about it as I'm in a CP world, or I'm in a packaging industrial world, or I'm in a farming world. Those lines blur very quickly across the end-to-end value chain. And you really need to actually set it up very, very differently than what you have. And that's going to be interesting to watch. I've seen many of our clients start selling investment funds to basically buy assets and think about vertical integration, or basically buy minority stakes to actually have a perspective to do that. But there's one rule of the game going forward is partnership. A partnership across the value chain.
Yeah, because you can't own everything. And the moment that you own everything, some other company will have a better value proposition somewhere else, and you'll need to partner with them.
Exactly.
No?
And look, if you look into the industry, you have a whole set of fragmented farmers,
Yeah.
or all the inputs that you have, very fragmented consumers at the top, but then all of the companies serving them are very concentrated.
Yeah.
Right? In any sector you
Yeah,
want.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
like from alcohol to meat to confectionery to pet food to like you name it, personal care, etc. You have a few companies along the way that basically have the market share. So to adapt to that circular world requires strong partnership along the way.
Yeah, and more, again, granularity and going to the detail. So, Bahige, there's one question that we ask all our guests here, which is, if you had to go back to your younger self when you were just graduating, what one piece of advice would you give yourself with everything that you've learned in your career?
I would say go out more of your comfort zone. Take risks. It's the best thing. If you look a little bit at my career, I'm from the Middle East. I'm Lebanese by origin. I went to Dubai for 5 years. Then basically I went to Chicago, spent 9-10 years in the States, and then came to London. I think this ability to go out of the comfort zone and go out of your environment is where you grow the most. Sometimes I would have probably pushed, do that sooner and do that more frequently, because that's what you learn. It's like putting a reset on your career, on your life, etc., and then learning. And I think that's where I learned the most.
And I think that, especially earlier on, it's a great time to take risks. No?
Exactly.
Because I think that sometimes it feels like it's like a flipping coin is going to turn out good or bad, but it's not really like that, no?
It's not really like that. And I think sometimes when you're young, you basically exaggerate in the choices you're making. You think, okay, this is going to be a choice for the life, where it's actually absolutely not.
Yeah, and it seems like sometimes things are going to be like you're all set for the future, and then your life changes from one moment to the next, or that things are going down and then you go up again. So,
exactly.
So absolutely. So Bahige, I'm going to try to I forgot to tell you about that, to raise some conclusions of our conversations. That's why I've been taking notes on these nice papers. So first of all, we talked about the CPO and its changing mandate. So going from cost to a much broader role that includes sustainability. The CPG, which actually this is a point that I would like to speak more to you about, that you mentioned was a hub of innovation before, and now what's happening in the innovation, but we can save that for another conversation. The big change in 2023, where the industry, the growth that was coming from price increases actually stopped. So now that was a big change of scenario. Supply chain, which is a lot about prediction and managing complexity, needs to be managed end to end. So really thinking of all the steps in the process. We talked about levers for growth about companies. What did we talk about there? Premium, the divide between premium categories. Well, no, within a category, premium products and value products. Personalization, value proposition, which is not only about being a great product, but also meeting there with the price confluence, right? A bit of leadership as well we talked about, which was cool, which good leader has to be someone that enables a company. You didn't say it in these words, but I'll say it. That enables a company to executives to put their egos aside, basically. And the leaders of tomorrow will have to be proactive in shaping the role of the company. So not only waiting for top down, but actually be proactive within their area and cooperate with their peers, basically. I asked you also about KPIs in the supply chain, and you mentioned on one side that they have to be in line with the goals of the company. And then you introduced the concept of Net Promoter Score, which is basically measures how much your customers, be it internal or external, recommend you. And that I think that you said that the goal was 9 out of 10, right?
9 or 10 to be a promoter.
Exactly. Finally, we talked about sustainability. which I think there's a lot to work on there, and that decarbonization is possible, and it seems to be relatively simple in terms of actions to do. The question is who will pay for it, which is the complexity, right? And that companies will have to move from shareholder impact to stakeholder impact. And it's ultimately going to be consumers and probably legal that will have to drive that change, or will automatically drive the change. And finally, about circular supply chains, which eventually will come, and they will have to change. That will mean changing the whole the way that supply chains work, and it's going to be based on cooperation. Hope that summed it up.
A fantastic summary. I think you can very easily now be a consultant. Maybe we should team up and take many of those and then drive.
Well, let me know. I'll never say no to a conversation. Thanks, Bahige, for the conversation.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.